Welcome to another video lecture by Utkal Digital Classes. I am your tutor Raghav Chaturvedi, and today we are going to learn about the magnetic effects of current. The important topics on this chapter include the introduction to electromagnetism, Ampere's circuital law, magnetic fields of some common configurations, and atomic magnetism. Now we go on to review the magnetic effects of current. So the branch of physics which deals with the magnetism due to electrical current or moving charges is known as electromagnetism. This all started with the scientist named Oersted, and he did a discovery in 1820. What he did was he kept a current carrying wire close to a compass needle, and he found that when you apply a current through the wire, then the needle of the compass shifts. If the needles of the compass is moving, then that means there is a magnetic field around the electrical wire, or a force is being applied on this needle. So due to his several observations that he made about the direction of the current, what happens when you increase the intensity of the current and everything, there were some results. I'll just summarize some of the results which will be useful. So a magnet at rest produces a magnetic field around it. Note that this is similar to electrical fields around electrical charges. So you cannot see the field, but it's a region around the charge where you can experience a force if you keep another charge. Okay. Similarly, for a magnet, you have that a magnet is at rest is producing a magnetic field around it. So if I have a magnet at rest, there are two poles, south pole and north pole. So you have magnetic fields around it. Okay. So similar to electrical fields, you can draw magnetic fields lines as well. We'll talk about them later. But in general, you can imagine a field around the magnet. Okay. So you should note that the magnet is producing a magnetic field around it when it is at rest, while an electrical charge at rest produces an electrical field around it, which we saw before. Okay. This was for the electrical charge. You should also note that a current carrying conductor has a magnetic field and not an electrical field around it. On the other hand, if a charge is moving with a uniform velocity, then that has a electrical as well as magnetic field around it. What this says is charges in motion lead to magnetic fields or B fields. Okay. You should also note that an electrical field cannot be produced without a charge, whereas a magnetic field can be produced without a magnet. Okay. One other thing that you should note is that all oscillations or an accelerated charge produces an EM wave as well, in addition to the electrical and magnetic fields. So not going into much history, now let's talk about and list some formulas and relations that will be essential for the paper. We start with telling you about what is a current element. So a very small element AB of length dl of a thin conductor carrying a current I is called a current element. Okay. You should note that the current element is a vector quantity. So this current element is a vector quantity and its magnitude is equal to the product of the current and length of the small element. Okay. The direction of this current element is in the direction of the current. Okay. So here the direction is in the direction of the current I. This brings us to the first law, which is the Biot-Savart's law. So whatever experimental results were there from the Oersted's experiment, the Biot and Savart arrived at some mathematical expressions that give the magnetic field at some point in space in terms of current that produces the field. Okay. So Biot-Savart's law is basically a relation between the magnetic field produced and the current producing it. Okay. So we'll just quickly summarize the results here. The first result that I must give you is dB is equal to mu naught by 4 pi into I dl sine theta by r square. Okay, this is the small magnetic field created due to the length element dl. This is the length element dl AB here, and we are trying to find the magnetic field at a point P. So the distance between these two is given by r, which is the denominator. Theta is the angle between r and the current element I. Okay, so theta is this angle. L is already known to you. Sorry, dl is known to you, theta is known to you, current, the magnitude of current is known to you. And what are these values? You already know. We've just talked about permeability. So this is permeability of free space, and this is just pi, 4 pi. So you'll be using this formula quite a lot. So I'll ask you to just take a note of this. So I'll just mark this again. Okay, this is the first equation. This is basically a vector form, so you can write this magnetic field in the vector form as well. Okay, and what is n cap here? N cap is the unit vector perpendicular to the plane of IDL and R. Okay, and why do we get this? Basically, this is the actual vector form of the entire thing. It's mu naught by 4 pi into I into dl cross r by r cube. Okay, this is what you should take into consideration. I can also write this as dB is equal to mu naught by 4 pi into I dl cross r cap divided by r square. So there is nothing much to learn here. This formula is valid for any current element. Okay, be it any configuration, you can always apply this formula. The other thing that I should tell you about is the magnetic field due to a moving point charge. So due to a moving point charge, the magnetic field is nothing but mu naught by 4 pi into q into v cross r, the cross product of velocity and the radial vector from that point to another point P, divided by r cube. Okay, so with this done, let's move on to the next thing. First of all, about the magnetic field lines, I'll just tell you about 1 or 2 points. So we'll make some space here. First of all, magnetic field lines were as a concept were given by Michael Faraday. Okay, so a thing about magnetic field lines, they are closed curves. These are essential because sometimes they will just give you 4 figures in the question and then they ask you which of these represents the correct situation or which of these is a incorrect way of describing the magnetic field lines. So first of all, these are closed curves. Okay. Next, you should notice the tangent drawn at any point on the field line represents the direction of the B or direction of B at the point. Okay. So tangent represents direction of B. Okay. The third thing that you should notice, they will never intersect each other. Never intersect. And the fourth thing that you should remember is, in any region, if field lines are equidistant and straight, then the field is uniform, otherwise not. Okay. So uniform B implies straight and equidistant lines. Okay, this is very simple. For a uniform field, you will have straight lines that will be equidistant. Okay, for the non-uniform field, you can have cases like here, one line is there. Okay, although they're all straight, but they're not equidistant, so the field is non-uniform. Similarly, for a non-uniform field, you can have field lines like this, or you can have the same distance but field lines of this sort. Okay, so these things should be kept in mind. Other thing that you should notice, at any place, the more crowded the lines are, the stronger is the field at that place. Okay. One more thing that you should notice, magnetic field lines will start or enter the surface of a magnetic material at any angle. Okay. And also that magnetic field lines exist inside every magnetized material. To describe these, we start with the right hand thumb rule. This rule gives us the pattern of magnetic field lines due to the current carrying wire. So if you have a straight current, which I have shown you here, then my fingers are okay. So I'll just tell you what happens. Uh, the thumb will give you the direction of the current. The curling finger, and when you curl your fingers around this current, okay. So what you imagine is, you imagine this to be the current going up. You place your thumb in the direction of the current, okay, and then you curl your fingers around whatever you imagine it to be, maybe a rod or a thin wire. Okay, you curl your fingers around it, and the curling pattern gives you the field pattern that is there. So in this case, you have curled your fingers around this straight line. Okay, so your magnetic field lines are circular like this. Also, the direction is also given by this. If the current was in the opposite direction, for example, if the current was in this direction, then my thumb would be pointing in this direction, and when I curl my fingers, again they will be circular in nature, but this time my direction of field lines will be opposite. So you should try this with multiple things to try out this rule. The same thing can be applied to circular current as well. Here also, you place your thumb on, imagine that you're placing your thumb on the wire. So for example, I'm placing my thumb on the wire and my thumb is in this direction. So my thumb is always in the direction of the current. Okay. And when I curl my fingers around it, when I curl my fingers around it, it gives me the direction of the magnetic field lines that are there. Okay. So if the current is going in this direction, okay, I know that when I curl my fingers, from looking from the top, I will see that the field lines are coming outside. If I place my thumb in this direction, which is the direction of the current, then I can see that when I'm trying to curl my fingers, okay, the magnetic field lines are going down. So this is the symbol for magnetic field lines coming out of the plane. This is for them going into the plane. You can draw, I have drawn these things again. So a wire is placed perpendicular to the plane of the paper here. Okay. So what you see is, when the current is going in the left side, you have field lines coming up. Similarly, when the current is going in clockwise direction, you have the field lines uh, going down, or the magnetic field pointing in the downward direction. Uh, you can also note what this means in terms of the observer, because here I told you that we are the observers. So I'll just zoom this in. So if this is the ring of current or the circular wire of current. So if the current is going in this direction, you keep your thumb in the direction of the current, and then you see that when you try to curl your fingers, okay, what happens is, uh, you will see that the field lines are coming outside. Okay, so basically you are observing it from outside the paper. If this is your sheet of paper, okay, then you are looking at it from the outside, from above the sheet of paper. So when you're looking from above, uh, the field lines will be as if they're coming out. So you can see that this small circular wire or a coil is nothing but a small magnet, and there are two poles of the magnet. One will be termed as the north pole, one as the south pole. Why is that so? From the north pole, we know that magnetic field lines come out. Magnetic field lines come out. Okay, and from the south pole, we know that the magnetic field lines go in. So using this principle, if the magnetic field lines are coming out, this is my north pole and this is the south pole. And similarly, if the current is going down, I keep my thumb there, I curl my fingers, and that implies that field lines are going in this direction. That implies this is my north pole and this is the south pole. To make this analogy from a bar magnet. This is what the field lines of the bar magnet looks like. So I'll just draw them for you. So if this is my north pole, this is my south pole. So my field lines will start from the north pole. Actually, there'll be lines here as well, because though there are no monopoles, and they start from the north poles, but they enter the south pole. Okay. So field lines come out of the north pole and they go into the south pole. Inside the magnet, they will be like this. So inside the magnet, they're going from south to the north, but outside, it's coming out of the north and going into the south. This is what you should note. And this is the same principle applied to circular loops. So circular loops are also like small magnets. Okay. With this done, let's start with some applications of the Biot-Savart's law. So the first application tells me about the magnetic field surrounding a thin straight current carrying conductor. Okay. If I apply the Biot-Savart's law here, and this is my conductor AB, this is the point P at which I want to find the magnetic field. So if I assume that the current is going in a certain direction, let's say current is going in this direction. Okay. If my current is going in the above direction, then what do I have? First of all, by the right hand thumb rule, I can easily see that when I place my thumb in the direction of current and curl my fingers, then we see that the magnetic field is going down at this point P. I imagine all these are in the same plane right now. Okay. Then you have a length element IDL, due to which we are trying to find it. We will find a dB due to it, and then we will integrate it over the entire rod. So what we find is my B is given by mu naught I by 4 pi A. What is A? A is the perpendicular distance of the point from your rod. So it's mu naught I by 4 pi A sine phi 1 plus sine phi 2. Okay. Phi 1 was the angle of P with one of the ends, and phi 2 is the angle with the other end. Okay. And a consequence of this is P is equal to mu naught by 2 pi into I by R. This is probably more important than the first formula. This is essential. If you learn this, it's really nice for you. But sometimes in the questions they only ask you for the formula of a infinitely long wire or a current carrying conductor. So for the infinitely long case, you have your formula 2, which is very simple, which is mu naught by 2 pi into I by R. Okay, or I by A. I'll just correct this here. And for the case of a finite one, you have mu naught I by 4 pi A sine phi 1 plus sine phi 2. Okay, let's talk about the magnetic field due to a loop of current. So due to a loop of current, we find that the magnetic field takes the form mu naught by 4 pi into I into 2 pi R square divided by R square plus x square to the power 3 pi 2. And how is this done? This is again similar to the loop of current that the loop of charge that we had in our case for electrical systems. So you have a point, let's see P. Okay, and you need to find the magnetic field at this point. So you have your radius given by R, you have the distance given by x, and this hypotenuse becomes root R square plus x square. So due to the loop of current, what we have is my magnetic field at any point P is given by mu naught by 4 pi into I cross 2 pi R square divided by R square plus x square to the power 3 by 2. This is an essential formula. I think you should remember this one. Consequence of the formula is if you put x is equal to 0, that is if you try to find the magnetic field at the center, it just takes the simple form. It is equal to mu naught I by 2r. Okay. Even if you don't remember the first form, in most of the cases the second will be asked in the paper, so it's essential that you remember the second form here and the second form here. Okay. The next thing that we look at is Ampere's circuital law. So what does the Ampere's circuital law say? It's a basically a integral over a closed surface or a closed line is equal to mu naught times the summation of the current that is flowing through the line. Okay. In more formal terms, you can say that the line integral of the magnetic field around any closed path in free space or vacuum is equal to mu naught times the net current or total current which is crossing through the area bounded by the closed path. So what does this mean? For example, if this is my lines that I draw, and inside it I have different currents. For example, I have current coming out here, I have a current going in here and here. I have a current going in here and current coming out here. And let me just mark these quantities as different. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So when I apply this law, the only current that I need to care about are the ones that are inside the loop. So only 1, 4, 2 and 3 will contribute. Okay, so 1 and 2 will be in the up direction and 3 and 4 will be in the downwards direction. So when you take the summation, you need to take the summation with signs in place. Okay, this is a very essential form, and the basic idea is if you have a current carrying wire, you can easily make a closed line around it and or a closed path around it, and then we can easily see that the magnetic fields at this point or at this point or at any other point in space is given by mu naught times the net current that is flowing in the wire or the conductor. We look at some applications of this. So Biot-Savart's law is a very essential tool, but using the Ampere circuital law, it becomes very easy to find the magnetic field of systems that have some symmetries. Okay. Even though they don't have some symmetries, we can find them out more easily than the Biot-Savart's law at times. Okay. So when a question comes in the examination and you're supposed to choose between which law to use, whether the Biot-Savart's law or the Ampere's law, you should note that the Ampere's law is suitable for infinitely long and symmetrical current distributions. Okay, and for the Ampere's circuital law, the radius of cross section of any thick cylindrical conductor and current density must be given in order to apply the law. We see this when we try to find the magnetic field due to an infinitely long solid cylindrical conductor. Okay, so I have given you a solid cylindrical conductor here. Okay, and we can easily make 3 closed curves around it, either this 3 which is outside, or 2 which is right on the surface, or 1 that is inside. So for each, the amount of current that is passing through the loop is different. Okay, let's talk about the different views here. So for a point which is inside the cylinder, for r is less than r, okay, we have that my magnetic field inside is given by mu naught by 2 pi I into small r by capital R square. Okay, you need not remember these formulas, you can easily derive them. So what you need to basically do is you need to use this formula, that integral of B dot dl is equal to summation of mu naught into I. So mu naught into summation of the current that is flowing through. So if I just apply it to the different ones, so for the outer circle, let's say for r is, let's talk about r is greater than r. For the circle 3, I can easily write this as what is my length element? It is 2 pi into r. Okay, and So B into 2 pi r is equal to mu naught times the current that is flowing. Let's say the current flowing is I. So we find that the B is equal to mu naught I by 2 pi r. Okay. Note that this is the same formula that I got for the infinite long wire case using the Biot-Savart's law. Okay. So with the same approach, we can use it for the second surface as well. And for the first surface, what will change? The net current flowing through the system will change. It will reduce because the current, we have the current per unit area that is flowing. Okay. So if you reduce the area, for example, if R is less than capital R, this area is less than the total area in which the current is flowing, or the cross section area. So definitely there will be some I prime flowing through the smaller surface, which will be less than I. It's not very hard to find these values out. So let's just summarize the results quickly for different systems. For R is less than R, you have your B inside given by mu naught IR by 2 pi r square. Note that B is proportional to R. So for a point on the axis of the cylinder, so if you're on the axis, there is nothing flowing inside it. So because there is no I flowing inside it, your B on axis is equal to 0. Okay, this is another very essential result that will be used later. So for a point on the surface of the cylinder, you get mu naught I by 2 pi r, capital R. Note that. And for a point outside the cylinder, which is R is greater than R, you have mu naught I by 2 pi r. So here it is varying inversely with R. So the graph for it can easily be made. So the graph includes B and B on the y-axis and R on the x-axis, and this is the linear relationship and this is the inverse relationship. So the next question is in front of you. A thin ring of 10 centimeter radius carries a uniformly distributed charge. The ring rotates at a constant angular speed of 40 pi radians per second about its axis, perpendicular to its plane. If the magnetic field at its center is 3.8 into 10 to the power minus 9 Tesla, then the charge carried by the ring is close to which of these four values? So let me just draw what the question has already given you. You've been given a ring which has some positive charges on it. Okay, let this has a radius r and this be the axis. Okay, now we can easily employ that the current due to the motion is given by what? It's charge into the frequency, which is nothing but charge by time period, which is nothing but charge into omega by 2 pi. Okay, now the magnetic field B is given by mu naught I by 2r at the center. So using the value of I from the above equation, I can easily write that B is nothing but mu naught times q omega divided by 2 pi divided by 2r, or I can easily write this as 3.8 into 10 to the power minus 9 is equal to mu naught by 4 pi into q omega by r, which is nothing but 10 to the power minus 7 into q into 40 pi divided by 0.10. Using this, you can easily see that q is nothing but 3 into 10 to the power minus 5 coulomb. Okay, which is the second option. Next, let's quickly take a look at the magnetic field due to a infinitely long hollow cylindrical conductor. For the case of the hollow cylindrical conductor, what do we have? This means that there is an inner radius A, there is an outer radius B. Okay, there is a conductor in this region and there is nothing flowing in this central region. Okay, there is current only through the conductor. So as I've shown here, the inner radius is given as A and the outer radius is given as B. So this is given as A and this outer radius is given as B. So when you're inside A, there is no current flowing, so your magnetic field there is equal to 0. When you're between A and B, then you need to form, let's say you need to form a circle here, and then you need to write B into 2 pi r is equal to the net current, let's say I prime, flowing there into mu naught. You just need to find this I prime, and that is not very hard to find. Okay, because you just need to find the current flowing through the entire surface, and then uh, tell me about the current that will be flowing through a surface of radius smaller. Okay, when you just do this, you get that B into 2 pi r is equal to mu naught I into r square minus a square by b square minus a square. Similarly, for the case of r being greater than b and a, okay, you see that this reduces to mu naught I by 2 pi r, which was the case for the solid cylinder as well. Okay, and r is equal to 0 again, b is equal to 0. So let's say these wires are there. These wires can be taken as solid conductors. Okay, so a wire is a solid conductor, and we saw that on the axis of the wire or at any point here, b is equal to 0 due to this wire. Okay, and for any other point, your b is equal to mu naught I by 2 pi r, where r is the perpendicular distance of that point from the wire. Next, you should note that the magnetic field due to the infinitely plane sheet of current is given by mu naught into lambda by 2. This is also essential. This has come in the papers before, and all these can easily be derived using the same Ampere circuital law. Next, let's talk about the magnetic field of a solenoid. So a solenoid is basically a device in which there are multiple turns, okay, or there are multiple coils attached to a device, and there's a current flowing through them. So because there is a current flowing through them, so for each loop acts as a small magnet. Okay, these are all circular loops. So the magnetic field at any point P of a solenoid, okay, inside is given as mu naught Ni by 2 into cos theta 1 minus cos theta 2, where cos theta 1 is the angle the point P has with one of the ends, and theta 2 is the angle between the two ends and the point P. So this is the cos theta 2. You should remember this. Okay, this is the most general form, and the more for the specific form that is generally asked in the papers is P is equal to mu naught into Ni. Okay, where mu naught is the permeability of the material that is placed inside the solenoid. So right now this is for the general case, so there is no material inside, so mu naught will remain the same. If there is a material inside the solenoid, then what will happen is this mu naught will turn to mu naught into mu r. Okay, what you should also notice, at the ends you have B is equal to mu naught I by 2. Okay, but most of the times the magnetic field that is inside the solenoid will be asked, so you shall only be concerned with this formula. Also note that magnetic field due to these coils outside is equal to 0. Okay, so they're all streamlined inside the system. Let's look at the force that is there on any current carrying wire. So let the current carrying wire has a initial point as A and it has a final point as B, and there is a current flowing through it. Okay, then my force is given by I into dl cross B. Okay, and what does this tell you? First of all, the force on the wire due to itself is 0, because the wire for itself will be on its axis, so it will not have any magnetic field. So you need an external magnetic field, and then you need to find what this external magnetic field does to a wire that is having a current through it. Okay, Similarly, you have your length, which is the integral of the dl from initial to the final point. These two should be kept in mind while doing the questions. We'll look at some problems that will elucidate this. What about the magnetic force acting on a moving point charge? This is a famous problem, and the cyclotron motion that you guys might have heard about is based on this. So what happens is you have a particle with a velocity v moving in a space which has a magnetic field, let's say in the above direction. So the force is given by q into v cross v. This is the general form. Okay. B is the external field, v is the velocity of the particle, q is the charge of the particle. Now when v is perpendicular to b, okay, when v is perpendicular to b, first of all, what is this? This is magnitude of q, magnitude of v, magnitude of b into sine theta between the direction of velocity and magnetic field into some n cap. Okay, this is my vector form. Now if they are perpendicular, then sine theta is equal to 1, and I can write easily that my centripetal force mv this goes in, this particle goes in circles, so the force will start acting on the particle, and what will happen is it will start to form complete circles. So the centripetal force will be provided by my qvb, okay, which will give me the radius of the circle as mb by qb. What this means is I'll just show you by this example. So my velocity, my electron, or let's say let me call this a positive charge plus q, it's moving with the velocity v. Now as soon as it enters this region where there is a magnetic field b in the above direction, first of all I need to take the cross product between v and b. So when I take the cross product, I will see that the direction of force will be in this way. So my plus q charge, when it's inside, will experience a force in this direction, okay, and then what will happen is it will start to bend on its trajectory, and these forces will continue every time the direction between the force will be central. So this will continue and you will form a complete circle. Okay. So your centripetal acceleration is given by this. You can easily find the radius through it. Similarly, you can find the time period of the motion of the point charge, which is given by 2 pi m by qb. Okay. Note one more thing, that if my velocity vector and the b vector are not at an angle of 90 degrees, then there will be two components. There will be an x component and the y component. Okay. So my radius will become mv sine theta by qb using the same form. But this time my centripetal force will include a sine theta component, and similarly my t will be given by 2 pi m by qb, that will not change. But there is something known as the pitch. Pitch is the distance that my particle will cover in one complete rotation. So for example, in the initial case when theta was equal to 90, what was my pitch? My pitch was equal to 0 because my particle would oscillate and would make a complete circle and come back to the same place. But now what happens is the particle takes a helical path, and it starts from this point. It starts to change its direction due to the magnetic force. Okay, but it keeps on moving in the other direction as well. So there is a constant velocity in the other direction. There is a velocity in the other direction, and there is circular motion in the other direction. Due to this, it takes a helical path. So it is moving in the horizontal direction with the velocity v cos theta, and the velocity in the y direction, which is basically your v sine theta, and velocity in the y direction, you have v sine theta. Okay, so this will undergo a helical path, and this is all you need to remember from this section. let's talk about magnetic force between two parallel current carrying conductors. So let's say you have two conductors or wires, one or two. Now if the current is flowing in the same direction, then first of all let me find what is the force on one due to two. So magnetic force per unit length of the conductor is given by some formula. We'll see how that formula comes. So the magnetic force on 1 due to 2 will be given by what? You first need to find my expression of force is what? It's I into dl cross b. Okay. So what this means is my F12 is nothing but my current in the first conductor into dl of the first conductor or the wire into b of the second conductor. Okay. And we already know the expressions of B from before. Due to a wire, my B is nothing but mu naught I by 2 pi r. Okay, so using that I can easily find that my force per unit length or per length element is given by mu naught I1 I2 by 2 pi into D. This is a very essential form and you should definitely remember this. Note that what will be the direction of the force, as these are cross products. So if two wires are having current in the same direction, then they will try to attract each other. If two wires have current in the opposite direction, they will try to repel each other. A beam of protons with velocity 4 into 10 to the power 5 into 10 to the power 5 enters a uniform magnetic field of 0.3 Tesla at an angle of 60 to the magnetic field. 60 degrees to the magnetic field. Find the radius of the helical path taken by the proton beam. Also find the pitch of the helix. The mass of the proton is given as 1.67 into 10 to the power minus 27 kg. Now we know that in this kind of motion, my radius of the helix, my radius of helix is given by r is equal to mv sine theta divided by q times b. Okay, I can just substitute the values. Why is this so? First of all, this is because this is the component of velocity perpendicular to the field, the v sine theta component. So I have 1.67 into 10 to the power minus 27 into 4 into 10 to the power 5 into root 3 by 2 divided by 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 into 0.3, which turns out to be 2 by root 3 into 10 to the power minus 2, which is nothing but 1.2 centimeter. Okay, this is denoted, I can denote this as the graph here, where this is my v sine theta. Okay, this is my v cos theta at the initial point, and sorry, these are my velocities. So v sine theta and v cos theta, where this was my velocity v, and this goes in helical paths. Okay, and this distance from here to here is nothing but the radius. So I have this to be equal to 1.2. Now in order to find the pitch, I'll write it here. So my pitch is given by is equal to v into cos theta. Okay, and pitch is okay. So pitch will be given by v cos theta, where, and we know that t is equal to 2 pi r by v sine theta. Okay, we have this into t. Thus I can write my pitch to be equal to V cos theta into 2 pi r divided by V sin theta, which is nothing but cos of 60 degrees into 2 pi into 1.2 into 10 to the power minus 2 divided by sin 60, which turns out to be 4.35 into 10 to the power minus 2 meter, or 4.35 centimeter. Let's take a look at another question. Current I is equal to 2.5 amperes flows along the circle given by the equation x square plus y square is equal to 9 as shown. Magnetic field at a point 0, 4 is given by what? 0, 0, 4. Okay. So how do we approach this question? We know that the magnetic field on the axis of a circular loop is given by the formula B is equal to mu naught divided by 4 pi into 2 pi current r square by r square plus x square raised to the power 3 by 2. Okay, using this and just substituting the values, we find that 10 to the power minus 7 into 2 pi into 2.5 into 3 square into 10 to the power minus 4 divided by 125 into 10 to the power minus 6 in the k cap direction, which is nothing but 36 pi into 10 to the power minus 7 in the k cap direction. Okay, which is one of the answers. I'll just write this again, into 10 to the power minus 7 t in the k cap direction. So here is the correct answer. Next, you're given that one of the two identical conducting wires of length L is bent in the form of a circular loop and the other in the form of a circular coil of n identical turns. If the same current is passed in both, the ratio of the magnetic field at the center of the loop B1 to that at the center of the coil BC is given by what? Okay, so let's just make the different things. First of all, we have a loop in orange. I'll make the smaller coil in green. Now, as you can see that the loop has a capital radius r, the coil has a smaller radius r, and the length, how is the length divided? My length is equal to 2 pi r and it is equal to n into 2 pi small r, because there are n turns and n rings in a coil, and each ring or each loop is having a perimeter of 2 pi r. Here there is only one perimeter. This implies I can easily write that r is equal to n times small r, or small r is equal to capital R by n. Okay, if this is clear, for both the things, what do we have? We have that B loop is nothing but the magnetic field at the center of a current carrying loop, which is given by mu naught I by 2r. Okay, and B of coil is how much? It is mu naught Ni by 2 times small r. So I can easily write the second one as mu naught capital N I by 2 into r by n, which is nothing but mu naught times n square I by 2r. This gives us that BL by BC is 1 by n square, which is one of the answers. Next, we look at a question concerning circular loops. A current loop having two circular arcs joined by two radial lines is shown in the figure. It carries a current of 10 amperes. The magnetic field at a point O will be close to what? So before doing this question, I'll just briefly tell you about some of the properties of circular loops. First of all, let's this be my let this be my circular loop. Okay. So we know that the magnetic field at the center of this loop, if a current I is flowing in it, is given by mu naught I by 2 times r, where r is the radius. Okay. But what if I take just a segment of this loop? When I take just a segment, let's say the segment AB, let it make an angle of theta with the center. Now the B prime, or the magnetic field due to just the segment AB, is given as theta by 360 of the magnetic field that would have been given by the entire circle. Okay, I'll call this B naught is equal to theta by 2 pi into B naught, and when this angle is given in degrees, or you can have the angle in radians. With this in mind, we'll approach this question. So in the question, what is given to you? You are given two circular arcs, okay, and arc is QR, RS, SP and PQ. The current in these is flowing in this direction. Okay. Now let me talk about the different segments. For the segment PQ and RS, the magnetic field that these segments induce at the point O is equal to 0. This is because these are straight wires and O lies on the axis of the wires, so the magnetic field component there is 0. Next, we look at the segment QR. So I'll just write it down with another pen. So due to the segment QR, I can write the magnetic field as mu naught. I'll just write it down much more clearly. So let's say it's B1. So due to the section QR, this is mu naught by 4 pi into pi by 4 I divided by R1. Why? Because using this formulation, I can write that my B prime is nothing but pi by 4 divided by 2 pi. Okay. So when I substitute this back times B, so when I use this in our question, I get B1 is expressed as this. Similarly, I can express my PS as mu naught by 4 pi into pi by 4 into I divided by R2. Okay, where R1 and R2 is given here. R1 is equal to 3 centimeter and R2 is equal to 3 plus 2 is equal to 5 centimeter. This is R1, this is R2. Now it's very simple to write the net magnetic field is equal to B1 plus B2, which is nothing but mu naught by 4 pi into pi by 4 into 10 into 1 by 3 into 10 to the power minus 2 minus 1 by 5 into 10 to the power minus 2, which gives us the answer as 1 into 10 to the power minus 5 Tesla, which is the answer number 4. In the previous questions, we were looking at the magnitudes of different things such as the magnetic field or the force. But now in this question, we will employ the directional nature of the magnetic fields or the forces to solve this one. Let's look at the question. There are two very long straight and insulated wires which are kept at 90-degree angles from each other in the xy plane as shown in the figure. These wires carry currents of equal magnitude I whose directions are shown in the figure. The net magnetic field at a point P will be given as what? So as you can note that P is at a distance of D from both the wires. Okay. Now I need to find the magnetic field due to each. This will be a sum of the magnetic field due to the first wire plus the magnetic field due to the second wire. Now for a wire, the magnetic field is given by mu naught I divided by 2 pi d or 2 pi r. Okay, so when I do this, for one of the wires, for the first wire, my let's say this is the first wire, this is the second wire. So now if you use your right hand thumb rule to find the direction of the magnetic field, for the first wire you see that the magnetic field is going into the plane. For the second wire you see that the magnetic field is coming out of the plane. So now if you just write the magnetic fields, you have mu naught by 2 pi into, or I can even take d outside. So I will have a current of minus k, this is in minus k cap plus k cap if I write it for both, and this turns out to be 0. So the magnetic field at that point turns out to be 0. Next, let's discuss what happens when you place a magnetic dipole in a magnetic field. So as shown in the diagram here, I have placed my magnet or my magnetic dipole. In the first case, I have placed a magnet here. In the second one, I have placed a current carrying loop. You know that a current carrying loop behaves like a small magnet. Current carrying loop. Okay. In both the cases, you have a net magnetic moment attached to the system. Okay. And what is the magnetic moment? Magnetic moment M of a coil is given as the current into dotted with the area of the coil, okay, or the area element. This is my formula for the net magnetic moment of a coil. You take a note of this. Let's talk about what happens when you place these dipoles in the magnetic field. As you know from before, these will experience a torque. So for a bar magnet, this torque is equal to M cross B, just like the case for electrical dipoles, and it is given by MB into N sin theta. The formula for M has been given before in the discussion of magnets. Okay. Now what about the coil or loop? Here torque is again M cross B, which is Ni into A cross B, because my M was given by I dot A. Okay. Or what you should remember here is this takes the form torque is equal to BI NA sin theta. Here N is the number of, N is equal to number of loops, A is equal to area element, and B is equal to the magnetic field. This is the external magnetic field. Okay. So the thing is the same thing. You have a torque that will try to align it in the direction of the magnetic field. Then you will talk about the work done by the torque in trying to align this. So the work done is given by mb sine theta into d theta. So you need to integrate this over two values of theta, and then you get the value as that the work done. The work done is given by mb into cos theta 1 minus cos theta 2. Okay, what are the thetas here? I can zoom out and show you. This was the angle between M and your area vector. Okay, so displacing the loop from some angle theta 1 between A and B to another angle between them will be given by this formula. We'll look at several questions to See how this works. And similar to an electrical dipole, you have U into the energy, potential energy due to this is equal to minus m dot p. Okay, let's go down and look at what is atomic magnetism. So due to the motion of electrons in circular orbits around the center of the nucleus or the nucleus, let me just make this as the nucleus, and the electron is moving around this thing. So due to this, there is an orbital current in system, because this is basically a charge moving in circles. So this is a current in a circular direction. So what is this current given by? Its current is given by the electronic charge E into the frequency of motion. Okay, because frequency has a units of 1 by t. So you have I is equal to E by F, which is nothing but E by the time period. Okay, and this turns out to be equal to E into omega by 2 pi. Okay, so when the electron is moving in orbits around the center, then there's a orbital current associated with it. Now because it's a current associated with a loop, then we will have a magnetic induction due to it. So magnetic induction at the nucleus position is basically the magnetic field at the center of this magnetic loop. So we already know the formula for a magnetic field at the center of a loop carrying a current. So that is given by mu naught I by 2r. Okay, and we can just easily write this down in terms of other factors such as the frequency of oscillation, the radius, the velocity, and the angular frequency. Okay, the next thing that you should look at is what is the magnetic moment of this circular orbit. The magnetic moment is again given by m is equal to I into a. Okay, and you can write the area as pi r square, where r is the radius of the orbit. R is the radius. Okay, it's pi r square. You can write this in terms of the time period t, velocity v, and the angular velocity omega as well. Okay, this is not that essential, but you should take a note of this as well. The final form is what is essential. You for an electron or for a charge moving in circular orbital, you have the magnetic moment for it written as minus E times L by 2m. Okay, and where L is given by nh by 2 pi. So the where L is angular momentum, L is angular momentum, and E is the electronic charge, m is the mass of the electron. So this is a very important relation, and this often helps us in solving several types of problems.